Welcome to the Love and Sex Today show with Dr. Doug Weiss. Doug has been healing hearts and relationships for decades. He's helped thousands of people release the shame and the guilt, restoring hope, helping people get free from addictions to enjoy a better sex and love life. Here he is, your host, Dr. Doug Weiss.
Welcome to Love and Sex Today. I am Dr. Doug Weiss, and I will be your host. Our 19th conversation is going to be on sex addiction, 6 different types. Now, sex addiction is an epidemic. It is huge, not just in America, but all over the globe. Billions of dollars a month transfer into the porn industry. Porn has become not just vogue, but it has become something that now 9-year-olds have in their phone. It is becoming something that every junior high, elementary school, high school, college campus has to deal with. It is costing us billions of dollars while men and women at their office sit and watch pornography. Well, why are these people becoming so addicted? Well, that's our topic today, and we're going to get into that in just a minute. I want you to go to loveandsextoday.com, subscribe there, and write a review for us on iTunes. Those reviews help people find us and find out what to listen to help their lives. So you can really be an encouragement to them. Also, there's always a free chapter on our webpage. And one of you that writes a review will get chosen for a private conversation, just you and I, priceless, engaging, and fun, to help you in some area of your life to just maybe get some new insights and maybe to expedite some growth in that area. So let's get to the topic today. Sex addiction is a big topic. And I've been in that field and a leader in that field for many, many years, decades actually, written many books on that. Today's topic is going to come out of The Final Freedom as it relates to sex addiction. Now, maybe you're not a sex addict. Maybe you have alcohol, drugs, or gambling, or other addictions. If you have those issues, the book would be Recovery for Everyone. Now, what I'm about to talk about is actually the foundation for the American Association for Sex Addiction Therapy. They train counselors all over the globe. They certify them to become sexual recovery therapists or coaches or pastors. And this is the foundation in which they assess someone with a sex addiction. So this isn't just self-help stuff. This is something that can really, if you went to a clinician who knew what they were doing, they would be giving you an assessment and going through these 6 types. Now, you wouldn't know what they were asking you, but at the end of that 20-minute conversation, they would be able to tell you what type of sex addict you are. Also, there's a 6 types test on the sexaddict.com, SEXADDICT.com. And you can get help with sexual addiction. I mean, I have seen thousands of people, men and women, get better. I have, several couples in my office just this week doing 3 and 5 days intensives on sex addiction. And they'll get better. Most of them do. And if you need help with that, you can always call our counseling center, 719-278-3708. Well, let's get into these 6 types because I'm going to have to go through these quickly. But I think if you're struggling with sex addiction, oftentimes you know that. And oftentimes you're the only one who knows that. You have a secret life. You have a double life. You have secret ways that you store information on your cell phone. You have secret ways of keeping monies if you're using money in your sex addiction. So you know you have a sex addiction. And if you do, then you want to listen in and find out what type, because once you know what type, getting better is so much easier. I mean, I've helped thousands of men and women within minutes discover why they're sexually addicted, which for them, for 30 or 40 years, they couldn't figure out. So let's go into this. Number 1, biological. When you have a sexual release, you get the endogenous opiates, hits the prefrontal cortex of your brain, and boom, you get this big chemical enchilada. Well, whatever you're looking at, you attach to. If that's fantasy or pornography, object, or something other than a human soul, you are attaching to an object world. And the repetition of that, ring the bell, feed the dog, ring the bell, feed the dog, all by itself can cause you to attach at a very deep level to fantasy, pornography, or objects. And if you do that, you can create an addictive type behavior, attaching yourself to an it instead of someone. It's the same attachment that causes people to want to stay married for decades because they're attached. And this desire for the fantasy and object pornography, all by itself, biologically can attach you. It hijacks your sexual reward system and moves you towards whatever that is that you are actually putting in front of that. Psychological. Most people with sex addiction have some kind of background, whether it's physical abuse, abandonment, never meeting their parents, or have someone recently, their parents got divorced when they were one, and then they were abandoned. Okay, well that's a big pain. You got to deal with that pain. And so psychological issues, emotional neglect, not being spoken to, not being encouraged, not being even noticed, just being managed, being emotionally abused, being called names, being shamed, put down, all that kind of stuff. Psychological pain needs medicine, just like physical pain. You want medicine. Well, often the medicine is the self-sex behavior, pornography, or something like that, and that medicates that. And oftentimes in the fantasy world, when someone has psychological pain, they compensate. If they have no control in the real world, maybe they want to be controlled or they want to control others in the fantasy world. If they're not wanted in the real world as a 12, 14, 16-year-old girl or boy, they are wanted in the fantasy and porn world. And so the psychological balancing that happens in sex addiction is something that helps a young adolescent survive adolescence, especially if there's been psychological pain. Now, the third is spiritual. It doesn't really matter what the spiritual community is. It could be Christianity, it could be a Muslim community, it could be a Jewish community, it could be even a New Age community. All of them have experiences with someone who is sexually out of control. They have a spiritual awakening, a come to Jesus moment, a finding God moment, a existential awakening, and they stop. See, what they were doing was filling the God hole that everyone has with sex, with pornography, with self behavior, with behavior with others. And as soon as they get that awakening, they're pretty much done. Now, on the balance of that, I've worked with every faith: Hindu, Muslim, rabbis, pastors, priests, every religion. And even though they were fully spiritually aware and mature, they still had a sexual addiction. Well, for them, it wasn't for spiritual reasons. They had usually the biological, psychological, or some of the other things we're going to get into. Fourthly, sexual trauma. Now, the sexual trauma addict is unique in that they tend to repeat, either as victim or perpetrator, the exact sex acts. And I can tell you countless stories of men and women who were sexually abused in a bathroom, and they end up, being sexual in bathrooms or cars or with a certain type of person. And so, whatever the sexual abuse was, it tends to duplicate itself in the way that they act out in a sexual addiction. I'll never forget a man who was in a hospital. This was early in my career. I created a sexual assessment, and I was in a medical hospital because the hospital called me to do an assessment on a guy who was suicidal. So I went into the psych ward, and they got the guy, put me in this kind of closet with him, and I did my assessment. And I asked him why he was here. He said he wanted to commit suicide. I said, well, why do you want to kill yourself? He said, well, I'm having an affair with 9 women, and I can't keep up with it. Okay, well, now I know why I'm sitting with you. And I went through his sexual history. And I said, well, the first time you had a sexual act with someone. And he was, very early adolescent, maybe like around 14 or so. He went down innocently to his friend's house, and his friend wasn't there, and the dad wasn't there, and the mom brought him in, and they had a sex act. And then the next day they had intercourse. And that went on, 2, 3, 4 times a week until he got married in his early 30s. And he didn't see that as sexual trauma. But guess how old every one of the 9 women was that he was having a sexual affair with? They were all 15 or more years older than him, duplicating his sexual trauma. Okay, the next one is a mood disorder, sexual addiction. Now, here's what happens: the adolescent has some kind of chemical imbalance, major depression, feeling down, low energy, worthless, maybe even suicidal, or some version in the bipolar family, bipolar 1, bipolar 2, manic depression, where the brain is going up and down at either a moderate level or an extreme level. Even cyclothymic disorder, the very mildest up and down. I've found clients who've had that throughout their life, and what they found is if they act out in a sexual way with self or others, or pornography or something like that, the chemicals that hit the brain through the sex act balance them out. They feel good for moments or hours, or they're able to go to sleep if they're kind of in an up mania state. they're able to crash, especially if they're men, because men get a chemical after sexual release that can put them to sleep. And so that's something that can happen. And they don't know that they found the medicine that makes them feel better, which is a sexual release. But eventually, over time, if they're pairing that medicine, especially with pornography and fantasy or an object, they begin to create an attachment, an addictive style to this. The last one is intimacy anorexia, sex addiction. This is someone who acts out with self or others, but will avoid intimacy spiritually, emotionally, and sexually with their spouse. They'll be too busy for their spouse. They'll blame their spouse. They'll withhold love. They'll withhold praise. They'll withhold spiritually. They'll withhold sex. They'll be unable to talk about their feelings. They'll be critical towards their spouse. They'll use anger or silence against their spouse. Sometimes they control and shame around money issues, and the spouse feels like a roommate. So this person has two addictive processes going on, one inside the marriage or primary relationship, and then also with themselves or fantasy or others in a sexual way. Now, sex addiction is a huge issue. If you have a sex addiction, you've tried to stop, you've made promises to stop, sometimes you've had consequences, used after the consequences. Sexual addiction is a big thing, and so are other addictions. If you have other addictions, alcohol, drug, you want to deal with these things because they keep you kind of underdeveloped, immature, and they keep you unable to really obtain what you could if you were fully developing and fully actualizing your dreams and your life. I'm Dr. Doug Weiss. This is loveandsextoday.com. I want you to go to that website and subscribe. Review us on iTunes. One of you will get that fantastic conversation with myself. Every month, my staff will pick one of you from those who review us on iTunes. There's always a free chapter at loveandsextoday.com. And I want you to continue. Remember, always have great love and have great sex. Enjoy your life.
That's it for our episode of Love and Sex Today with Dr. Doug Weiss. Head on over to loveandsextoday.com and be sure to subscribe to the show on iTunes. When you do, and you post a review on iTunes, some lucky listener is going to win every single month a private confidential coaching call with Dr. Doug Weiss. Also, feel free to ask any question you like. You can push a button, speak your question, and Dr. Doug will answer your question in a future episode. So be sure to subscribe to the show. Doug's got some great gifts for you, and we will look forward to seeing you next time.